Hey everyone, Cleo here, and today I'm doing another book talk. I'm talking about The Memory of Souls by Jenn Lyons today. So this is the third book in A Chorus for Dragons, meaning that if you have not read any of the previous books within this series, I recommend you check out my book talk for the first one instead. So I'll have that one linked up above, so that's my book talk for The Ruin of Kings. So, Memory of Souls, third book within the series. It is becoming more and more difficult for me to talk about these, I think. While this is the book that I've enjoyed the most at this point, I'm also kind of wondering, like, what can I talk about with this one? Because so much of what I loved about this one, I kind of feel like I cannot really talk about it because it would spoil what is happening within this one. But so, let's just try, let's see where we get, let's see how much I can dive into with this one. So first up, let me just talk about the overall structure. So as was the case with the previous two installments, we have that same sort of structure of an introductory letter to a report, which will be split between a frame story and a story within the story. The frame story takes place at a different period in time, a period in time more forward in the future, let's say like that, in which we have two characters who are talking together and exchanging stories, and then the story within the story will be those two different stories or those two viewpoints that are alternating their storytelling. Within the previous two ones, you could kind of read them in parallel to one another. The story within a story was more or less same time period, and the frame story wasn't all that divided when it came to the period of time that elapsed between the two. But this one is going to be different because in this one actually the story within the story or the stories within stories will for the most part be taking place right after the second book, and then the frame story is actually taking place at an unknown point of time in the future. So we have moved, I don't know how many months, years into the future within the frame story, and they are looking back at what has happened leading up to that point in time. And another difference with the original two books within this series is that the sort of moment in which these two timelines coincide is pretty much the end of the book in this case. It's gonna be quite late in the game that we have that frame story and story within the story meet one another. So in previous books that also has been relatively late, but in this one I feel like it's like the final chapter or something is when those two timelines coincide. So the story within the story, which viewpoints are we looking at within this one? So we are once again looking at Kieran, but the other person who is telling their story in this case is going to be Turvashar. Interestingly enough, Turvashar is also going to introduce other perspectives into his storytelling. So he is compiling accounts. He's now getting Kieran's account of events, but he's actually already compiled some other viewpoints as well, and so he will be interlacing those throughout his storytelling as well. So we don't just have Kieran and Turvashar's story, but we also have the story, for example, of Kieran's mother. We also get Senare's story, and one of the most interesting things that we get here as well is a sort of background story to the original creation of the dragons, I guess. Is that the best way to describe that? I guess, yeah. Now, central to this story is the plot development we had at the end of The Name of All Things, of course, is the release of Volkarath. So the threat of Volkarath is definitely going to be present throughout this book. We have certain themes as well in which Volkarath will be making a presence. From time to time it seems like Kieran is also being haunted by Volkarath, and we will have some exploration of what all of that entails. And I gotta say, love it. Love also the way in which this book ends when it comes to the whole Volkarath story as well. But there is still one route that we can take, and that is to perform a sort of ritual that has made previous races immortal. But there is only one more immortal race out there, and getting them to give up their immortality might not be such an easy fix. But interlaced throughout we also get some of the background story to the sort of like Kieran's past life, to the original ritual that Relosvar was trying to perform, the original ritual that ended up with the creation of the dragons. So through those stories we of course get a little bit more of understanding of the world building, of the history that has gone into this world, into the situation that we have landed in at the beginning of book one. I found that to be very interesting, and I definitely got a little bit better understanding of the history of this world. And when it comes to things such as the Manolvane and the Kurpesvane, I also think that those types of differences were dug into a little bit more within this book, and that they started to make sense to me a little bit more than they have based off of my experience reading the first one. But what definitely is the sort of like heart and soul of this book is the relationships, is the interaction between the characters. For the first time we get Janelle, Kieran, Terate at the same time, and let's not forget Dervishar, because even though in principle he could be considered a sort of like fourth wheel, a sort of like fly on the wall in the situation, he performs that role perfectly. He is this sort of like perfect fourth person to be able to observe and comment on the sort of interaction between the four of them, and I just fell in love with Dervishar throughout. He is representing asexuality. I will be perfectly honest with you guys, I personally didn't pick up on that at all. Maybe I'm just too focused on the other relationship within this one, or it's because I'm ace myself, and so everything that he was feeling just felt perfectly normal to me, so I didn't really notice, I guess. But so we do get some asexuality representation within this one as well. And Dervishar is just such a great character. I really enjoy him. I've always enjoyed his sort of commentary in the footnotes of the first one, for example. So I really enjoyed this character throughout, and I definitely think that he has great moments within this one, great moments as well with some love interest for him as well. Some moments that also break from the view that we've had of him so far. And when it comes to the interaction between Janelle, Kieran and Terate, finally, we've been waiting for it. Let's already indicate that we don't take it all the way yet, but I am so hopeful that we will end up getting there. But we do definitely already have interesting moments taking place within this one, and I also think that it's great that we have so far seen Kieran and Janelle bond, we have seen Kieran and Terate bond, we have had like a one scene of Janelle and Terate, but in this one we also see a little bit more of Terate and Janelle, for example, together, so that we really kind of close that triangle, so that we build up all three relationships and really make the circle round, really indicate that we're going to move towards polyamory rather than the sort of traditional love triangle in which it's really the case that basically there are just two people loving the same person, and that one person also clearly has a preference for one of the two characters. So yes, still very much loving the relationships within this one. There are some beautiful moments within this one that I cannot talk about because of spoilers, but they are in there, guys. But beyond that, there are so many other great relationships to root for, especially since at some point it just becomes one elaborate family drama, as we have Terate's father in the mix, we have Kieran's mother and father in the mix. And considering the first book, that is already interesting in and of itself. But that whole sort of situation where you have all these characters together for the first time, and then you have some of their parents involved as well, who also have a very complicated relationship in amongst themselves. It just leads to a lot of awkwardness and a lot of family drama, but of the best type to be reading about, at least to be observing, to be a fly on the wall for. So I think it is an amazing read. I absolutely adored every single moment of it, and the way in which this book ends is super interesting because we are definitely stirring up things. There are changes taking place within the sort of like final quarter of this book that are gonna have major implications when it comes to the fourth installment, when it comes to certain things that have been a given up until this point. And the final 15 pages or something like that really shook things up, so I'm very eager to dive into the fourth one. Is there anything else about the third one that I can still talk about? We do get a little bit more of the dynamic with the Vane. As I mentioned before, you get a little bit more of understanding into the Vane, but also into their sort of like genetic workings. How do you call that? I don't know. I don't even know what the correct term is here. Biological workings or things like that. And that will have interesting possible implications for our ship. But it's in any case an interesting element to introduce into a fantasy world. Yet again, it's another case of Jenn Lyons using her creativity to introduce a sort of interesting fantasy element that I have not seen yet, I think, in any other fantasy book that I've read in any case, which is not to say, of course, that it doesn't exist in others. But yeah, apart from that, it really is just too difficult to talk about this book because of spoilers, because the majority of things that I absolutely love about this one, I don't really want to talk about because I want you guys to explore it all on your own. So that's what my problem is with this one. in terms of this review. But so yeah, I hope it's been useful to you guys regardless. I think the main takeaway here is that if you were kind of wondering whether we were just going to go back into the past again and get like Terraid's past or Turvishar's past and then have those storylines lead up to the present day moment, we've definitely moved away from that structure. We are continuing on past what has taken place at the end of the second book, and that will have big implications for the way in which the third book take place. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video and hope to see you guys for a future one. Bye!